There are different things that can be done, I think, in the context of Syria. One of them is certainly to kind of explore the extent to which you can start to network and build the capacity of alternative actors to find ways to sort of build alternative forms of, negotiation amongst themselves. Another one would again relate to using aid delivery as an opening for beginning these types of negotiations amongst quite polarized actors across the society.
Martin?
I don't put any faith at all in the feckless political class in Lebanon. I think that the issues are far bigger than them, even if they wanted to confront them. And I do think that there has to be a point, an intersection of the strategic interests of the key players, the Saudis, and the Iranians in particular, but also the Russians and to some extent the Americans. Now, what would Iran be prepared to compromise on? If you wanted to game that, it would be what's more important to them in terms of Syria. It's Hezbollah. Hezbollah are the most potent arm of their foreign policy by a long, long way, and the strategic bridgehead that Damascus gives them is essential. They would probably go for something like a deal which retains the systems and structures of, or part of the regime in terms of its support for Hezbollah, but gets rid of Assad and some of the key players. I think that's as much as you could hope for from them, and I'm not sure that goes far enough for Saudi and for America. So what can be done? There must, if there isn't now, there has to be very soon a mutual recognition that this is absolutely assured destruction of all on all sides. And I do think that the Iranians are starting to see that with this public face of diplomacy that they put out there.
I mean, what I draw from what you've just said is that before formal diplomacy, right, before thinking about Geneva 3 or whatever, you're actually thinking about a job of persuasion to do, which is not only directed at one actor or another, but in general, that the stakes in this are enormously high and that mutual assured destruction is the sort of the destination at the end of the route which we're now on, so it has to change.
That's right, and I think people actually see it, but they think that we're far enough away from it to actually U-turn when we want to.
Soon enough, yeah. Julien?
I agree 100% with Martin. I mean, I think the only way that you can hope to shape this in a more positive direction is through the regional players and their influence on the ground. I think it's going to take a long time, and I think even if they do cut a deal, how does that work out in Syria with the blood that's been shed, with the sectarianism that has emerged? I mean, that doesn't play out quickly. So I think it's a long time for it to play out, but I see it as being the only way of shifting a trajectory eventually. I would say one thing, before you start talking about persuasion, is, the initial step is accepting you can't win. And I think that you can't win, and I think that goes to Martin's point that what is the alternative is mutual destruction. And I think until we accept in the West amongst the opposition that there is no winning solution, unfortunately, and that actually you're going to have to deal with the Assad regime in some sense. And that the question of the transition, forget about it. Assad's not going anywhere. He's got but he's lost control. Yeah. No, but he's lost control of Syria. So it's a different question.
So we have the option of doing nothing and maintaining Assad in power, and we've tried that. We've had a lab.
But we haven't.
We've done that in Iraq. We've maintained Saddam Hussein in power after 91. We've allowed him to destroy the country. He killed in 2 months more than Assad in 3 years. We did nothing. He kept us busy with dismantling his chemical weapons, and we played along, cat and mouse game it was called at the time. We punished the Iraqis instead with sanctions. We did no-fly zones, which divided the country into 3 parts. We then gave him more power.
I agree. I agree.
So doing nothing has consequence and has a cost, and doing nothing in Syria has a consequence and a cost. The more you keep Assad in power, the more you will get destruction, because he is staying in power because he is destroying.
Okay, but to counter that, let me just finish. You're not doing nothing, because I would argue at the moment you're saying Assad must go, you're pushing that agenda, and you're doing nothing at the moment, effectively.
Yes.
Actually, what I'm saying is that you have to accept that Assad has to be part of the solution, the Iranians have to be part of the solution, and you proactively say they need to be brought in. You proactively don't go to the negotiating table saying the negotiations are about when Assad and the Iranians leave. That's not negotiation. You say, so you proactively shift your approach towards negotiations, which is recognizing that the Iranians are not going anywhere. Assad has a strong support base. He's not going to. How do you engage these actors, although it's, they're amoral, into a process whereby they gain some of their interests, the opposition gains some of their interests, the regional powers gain some of. You cut a deal.
Cutting a deal prolongs the conflict.